I can't see a world in which I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point. And the things that they're going to miss is, well, everything. You know, I love my country. I always have done, despite what some people in that country have done. So, you know, I miss the UK. I miss parts of the UK. Of course I do. And I think it's really quite sad that I won't be able to show, you know, my children my homeland. You know, and I think what really worries me more than anything else about today's decision, depending on, you know, what happens next, is that it's set a new precedent, that security can be used to control members of the family. And effectively what it does is imprison other members of the family from being able to, you know, choose a different life. You know, if for me, security is conditional on having an official role, one that both myself and my wife wished to carry on, but then was rejected, not by Ravek, was rejected by the royal household. And the result to that is you lose your security. That basically says that you can't live outside of their control, if you want to be safe.
Do you want the court battle to continue? Do you want to try to see this get to the Supreme Court?
I don't want any battles to continue. There is way too much suffering and way too much conflict in the world. This, at the heart of it, is a family dispute. And it makes me really, really sad that we're sitting here today, 5 years later, where a decision that was made, most likely, in fact, I know, to keep us under the roof. But then once they realized that wasn't going to work, once they realized that, you know, myself, my wife, and our kids are happier outside of the institution, then please just look at the facts. Look at the risks, look at the threat, look at the impact that if anything was to happen to me, my wife, or my father's grandchildren, if anything was to happen to them, look where the responsibility lies. You know? So, you know, there's a duty of care that has been completely thrown out the window. And that doesn't feel great. So for me, having an official role was conditional on keeping security. But for everybody else, people who have chosen this life to enter into public office and then leave, get it for life, regardless of whether they have risk or threat to their name. And by the way, I agree with that. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. That if you come in and you serve your country, even if it's a minimum of 4 years, that you get the protection that you require because of your public service. I was born into this position. It wasn't a choice. I've served my country for 35 years. I believe that I am still continuing to serve my country. Public service is my life. That is the dedication that will never change. And then all the other bits and pieces that are added to that. You know, there are very, very real threats that exist out there. Some that are known about, some that have been withheld. And for people in power and responsibility of decisions to know that those threats and risks exist, but to turn around and say, well, because you don't have an official role, your life doesn't actually matter anymore. Well, you can imagine how I feel about that, but you can also imagine, not even imagine, that is the most illogical argument in the history of arguments. At this point, I'm feeling very let down. You know, it's the minority of people, especially those that read the tabloids and the press themselves. The press themselves have incited so much hatred towards myself, my wife, and even our children, that's hard to forgive. I actually couldn't believe it. I thought with all the disagreements and all of the chaos that's happening, the one thing that I could rely on is my family keeping me safe. And not only did they decide to remove my security in the UK, but they also signaled to every single government around the world not to protect us. I would love reconciliation with my family. There's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has. You know, he won't speak to me because of this security stuff. But it would be nice to reconcile. As I learned through the First Nations throughout Canada, because of the Invictus Games, their goal in life was always truth and reconciliation. And I turned around to them in many conversations and I said, right, but reconciliation can't come without truth. Well, I've now found out the truth. I've shared some of it with you today. A lot of it exists out there, whether people choose to ignore it or not. You know, so it would be nice to have that reconciliation part now. If they don't want that, that's entirely up to them.
And just to be absolutely clear, what is the difference between the top level security you say you should have and the security you are given on this case-by-case basis when you go
so
to
the details of the security I can't talk about. All I will say is that the last R&B assessment that I was given, I scored the highest. The only person within the family that scored anywhere near that was my grandmother. Overnight, I was reduced to the lowest. This case-by-case basis has been used by RAVEC and also by large sections of the British press to say, well, what's the big problem? You're given something on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, that case-by-case basis is separated by the reason for my visit. Sorry, just to give you more context on that. It's not really a case-by-case basis. It's an either-or. If you're invited to the UK by your family, then we will give you security. If you come for any other reason, then you will get a very low amount of security. I'm not going to confirm what that is, but it is completely insufficient. Somewhere along the line, people have talked about the fact that it really, all it is someone on the end of a phone. So, you know, no matter how much private security I have around me, there's only so much that I can do and operate and function within the UK when it comes to supporting my charities, visiting my friends, all of these things. So, you know, I've been treated very, very, very differently to everybody else that exists. All examples that exist, past, present, I have been singled out.
Finally, just because you mentioned, you know, your connection to your country, your public service, after this years-long battle, do you think your relationship has changed with the UK? Do you feel let down by your country?
That's a big question. At this point, I'm feeling very let down. You know, it's the minority of people, especially those that read the tabloids and the press themselves. The press themselves have incited so much hatred towards myself, my wife, and even our children. That's hard to forgive. You know, there are decisions that have been made. There are things that have happened since 2016, especially throughout my whole life. But let's just stick since 2016. There are things that have happened that I can now forgive. I have moved past that. I can forgive my family's involvement, my father, my brother, and my stepmother. I can forgive the press to a large extent as well for so many things that have happened. What I'm struggling to forgive, and what I will probably always struggle to forgive, is that a decision that was made in 2020 that affects my every single day, and that is knowingly putting me and my family in harm's way. Everybody knew that they were putting us at risk in 2020, and they hoped that me knowing that risk would force us to come back. But then when you realize that that didn't work, do you not want to just keep us safe? Whether you're the government, whether you're the royal household, whether you're my dad, my family, despite all of our differences, do you not want to just ensure our safety? And I'm calling for, you know, the Home Secretary and the government to do a review of RAVEC. And I'm also asking for an R&B assessment that I haven't received since 2019.
And how does that make you feel, given you have expressed numerous times that you do not want history to repeat itself?
I don't want history to repeat itself. I think there's a lot of other people out there, the majority, that also don't want history to repeat itself. Through the disclosure process, I've discovered that some people want history to repeat itself, which is pretty dark.
That's quite a statement. Who do you think that is?
I'm not going to share it at this point. You know, I know all the names of the people that were involved in this process. And again, you have to question, why wasn't I put through the same risk management board that everybody else was put through, including members of my family?
And you rejected not because you're no longer a working royal.
I couldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe it. I thought, with all the disagreements and all of the chaos that's happening, the one thing that I could rely on is my family keeping me safe. And not only did they decide to remove my security in the UK, but they also signalled to every single government around the world not to protect us.
By the name of Harry and Meghan are in the news today because Prince Harry wanted a better security deal in his eyes from the UK. Do you think our country has handled this member of the royal family well?
Well, I'm a little biased. I don't know. And I mean that. I quite literally haven't paid enough attention to how your country has handled it. I will say this. They're proud residents. And I'm proud they're residents of California. And I've gotten to know them. And you talk about those wildfires. I just want you to know, without any fanfare, one of the first volunteers that I saw within hours of the fires was Prince Harry and his wife. And that was a point of pride. They didn't need to be there. And it's not the first time. I've had dozen experiences. And by the way, I'm not exaggerating. 10, 11 experiences similar where the Prince and Meghan have shown up. So that's all I can add to the conversation.
What were they doing in the firefighting crisis?
They were doing two things. They were showing up for first responders, of which they have a unique connection, and I see that in terms of the rapport. And they were also showing up for the community without being asked. They were there handing out materials and supplies, asking if they can get involved in the food banks and distribution of emergency supplies. I saw that in floods down in Santa Barbara. I saw that in other fires that got less attention in the past. I've had the Prince reach out to me on other causes, asking, how can I get involved in a way that doesn't generate all the attention? And that to me is a character test. That's my direct interaction. All the rest, I leave all that noise to others and more objective minds.